Greetings and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Deploying Branch Sites with Microsoft Link Server 2013. In this video presentation, we're going to be looking at branch site resiliency with Link Server 2013. Branch site resiliency refers to the ability of clients to be able to make and receive phone calls even when they encounter some form of an outage out at the branch site, such as when your WAN link over to your centralized telephony environment goes down. We never want to underestimate the optimal value that we have by having highly resilient, highly available WAN links. But if your WAN links go down, Microsoft Link provides several solutions that can allow your clients out at a branch site the ability to make and receive phone calls even when they can't connect across those links. In this video, we're going to see several different choices. We can deploy survivable branch appliances, survivable branch servers, or even have full link deployments out at those corporate branch offices. Let's take a look at some of these solutions. With Microsoft Link Server 2013, one of the choices we have for providing branch site voice resiliency is to use survivable branch appliances out at the branch offices. Carve Rock Fitness has two central sites, one in Phoenix and one in Scottsdale, and those two physical locations are connected by high-speed, resilient, redundant WAN links. The problem that we have out at the branch offices is that we have single WAN connections out to the branch sites and they're not highly available. And if those WAN links were to go down, the clients wouldn't be able to make and receive phone calls. So in our design decisions, we've been looking at the number of users that we have at the branch offices to make our choice in what technique we're going to use to provide that voice resiliency. Now Mesa has about 250 users at that branch site, so we're going to deploy survivable branch appliances for offices that have smaller sizes. A survivable branch appliance is designed to support up to 1,000 users, but keep in mind that there are different manufacturers and different models, and some of the models are designed for smaller scale deployments, others for larger scale deployments. For example, later on in the presentation, we'll see a graphic that has several audio codes SBAs designed for small, medium, or large size branch offices. What exactly does a survivable branch appliance do for us? Well, when a client out at that branch office powers up and they go to register with the Link environment, they'll typically register with the survivable branch appliance that's local to their corporate branch site. When you're setting up a survivable branch appliance, it will have local connectivity. So for example, you could have a PSTN connection locally out at that branch site, or a SIP trunk connection. So that if the WAN link over to the centralized telephony environment over in Scottsdale were to go down, the clients out at that branch site can still make and receive phone calls. As an example, if I'm out at the branch site and I place a call to somebody in HR over in Scottsdale, with our voice over IP infrastructure and enterprise voice, we'd like to route the call across our WAN link and leverage off of the real-time audio. Well, if that WAN link goes down, the call could get rerouted out through our local PSTN connection or out through our ITSP, and then back in through the connection over at the central site in Scottsdale. Now you want to remember that even though Microsoft Link does support peer-to-peer real-time audio calling, this is a feature that is used for enterprise voice-enabled clients, clients that have telephone numbers that can make and receive phone calls going out beyond the corporate environment. To understand the benefits of a survivable branch appliance, you have to understand the basic concepts between a central site and the branch site that's associated with it. When you set up a branch site inside of your Topology builder, you have to associate your branch site with a pool in a central site. The pool over in the central site is going to provide the user mode application services to the branch. So for example, a survivable branch appliance doesn't provide presence information to your clients, and it also doesn't host your conferences. So if I'm a client out in the Mesa branch site, I am going to have to go across the WAN link to the pool over in the central site of Scottsdale to host my conferences. So a conference doesn't run locally on an SBA, it's going to run on the pool that the SBA is associated with. So this means that if your WAN link over to the central site were to go down, your clients out at the branch office will be running in survivability mode. They will be able to make peer-to-peer calls. You'll have peer-to-peer IM out at the branch site. You'll have peer-to-peer audio and video out at the branch site. And you'll also be able to make and receive enterprise voice calls going out through the ITSP connection or through your PSTN connection. Now, because your conferences are running over on the pool that you're not able to connect over to across your WAN link, we would be able to dial in to gain access to the audio portion of our conference because it's our WAN link that's down, not the pool that my branch site is associated with. Another example of an outage would be if our branch site has a survivable branch appliance that were to go down. If I have a survivable branch appliance in Mesa, and it's providing the ability for clients to register and authenticate, if the SBA were to go down, the clients in Mesa will route across the WAN link and register with the pool over in Scottsdale. When you set up a survivable branch appliance inside of your Topology builder, you have to associate the SBA with a central site pool. And the SBA will use that pool as its backup registrar, which provides automatic failover for your clients. So if all of a sudden my SBA over here in Mesa were to go down, when the clients go to register with the local SBA and it's not available, the clients will fail over across the WAN link and they'll register with the link pool across the WAN. And those clients will have access to their user mode services which run on that pool. At Carverock Fitness, we have a larger branch office over in Chandler, which is used for our distribution of health products. For larger branch sites between 1,000 and 2,000 users, we have several different options available for providing our branch site voice resiliency. You can use multiple survivable branch appliances. If an SBA supports up to 1,000 users, and you have more than one SBA, we can go beyond that 1,000 user mark. With a survivable branch server, it supports up to 5,000 users, but you have to remember that if you set up a survivable branch server, this is a regular Microsoft Link server install. Whereas with an SBA, you purchase it from a qualified vendor, it ships to your company, and then you have to deploy it onto your network. With a survivable branch server, well, the process for installing it is very similar in the sense that you've got to go into your Topology builder, you have to define your branch site, and then define the server within the branch site. Well, we do that both for an SBA and an SBS. But with your survivable branch server, you have to run through the link install, where you run setup, you pull a copy of CMS locally to the server, and then you run the setup program and install a certificate down to the SBS. Another big difference between your survivable branch appliances and your survivable branch server is that a survivable branch server does not have an integrated gateway built right into it. So depending upon the choice that you have for whether you're using SBAs or an SBS and your connectivity to your provider, it may dictate that you have to purchase a PSTN gateway also. For your larger corporate branch offices that have over 2,000 users, Microsoft recommends using either a Link Survivable Branch server or possibly a full Standard Edition server deployment. A Link Survivable Branch server works identically to an SBA in the sense that you have two roles installed on it. You have the mediation server role and you have the registrar role. So if a client were to register out at a branch office with a survivable branch server, the client still has to go across the WAN link over to the central site in Scottsdale or Phoenix to gain access to their user mode services like your conferencing. So in the case of a WAN outage, clients out at the branch site in Buckeye, they wouldn't be able to gain access to their conferences across the WAN link. As an alternative to using survivable branch servers for large branch sites, we could deploy full Standard Edition servers. A Standard Edition server does have the application services locally, so if out at the branch office you have a Standard Edition server, and your WAN link over to Scottsdale or Phoenix were to go down, your clients would still have access to their user mode services locally. In this diagram, we see a high-level overview of our enterprise voice resiliency architecture at Carverock Fitness. On the left portion of the diagram, I have two central sites, Phoenix and Scottsdale. In each central site, we have a pool, and the pools are named accordingly, Phoenix and Scottsdale. Between the two central sites, we have high-speed, redundant, resilient WAN links. And over to the right, you can see that I have a branch site, and this is an example of one of my sites. Here we have an example of Mesa. The WAN link out to the branch sites are not resilient or highly available. So we're going to be using survivable branch appliances or survivable branch servers in connectivity either through PSTN or SIP trunk connections. To provide high availability of my servers within a central site, we're using the Enterprise Edition of Microsoft Link Server, and we're going to be installing 3 servers per pool. With Link Server 2013, you have to have a minimum number of healthy servers before starting a pool's services. And the actual quorum is a function of the total number of servers that you have in your pool. If you're going to use less than 3 servers, Microsoft recommends that you go with the Standard Edition of Microsoft Link. With Microsoft Link Server 2010, the predecessor to 2013, we had the ability to go into our Topology builder and to define backup registrar pools. So if a client tried to register with their pool and the entire pool was not available, the client could register with a backup registrar pool, and this was automatic. When the client registered with a backup registrar pool, the client would run in a reduced functionality state. There's certain information and application services over in your pool that were not going to be available to you because your pool was down. For example, your conferences wouldn't run, and any of the apps running on your front-end pool, like the automated call distribution and so forth, wouldn't be working. Microsoft Link Server 2013 still has the concept of a backup registrar, but they've also enhanced it a little bit. So not only can we have automatic failover support using a backup registrar, so with our central site pools in Scottsdale and Phoenix, we're setting them up in a pooled peered design. So what is going to happen is the pool in Scottsdale and the pool over in Phoenix, they're going to replicate certain information that was not available to replicate back in the Link Server 2010 days. A lot of the user homed data that we have over on the RTC database now has the ability to replicate between the pools that are set up in a peered design. So not only can we have automatic failover to provide voice resiliency in the case of a site outage, we can also fail the clients over to another pool, which is a manual process. It's a manual failover. And due to the replication handled by a new Link Server replication service, a lot of the user home data, like your conferencing and your contact data and so forth, that now replicates over to the other pool, and it will be available to you if your administrator invokes a failover of your clients. Again, keep in mind that the failover process in this case is a manual process, but we still have the ability to failover with backup registrars and still maintain enterprise voice capabilities in the case of a minor outage. Now, why am I talking about all of this? Well, if I take a look at what goes on out here in a branch site uses the central site that it is associated with, or the pool it is associated with, as its backup. If I'm not able to register up against my SBA over in Mesa, the SBA in Mesa is going to be associated with a pool, in this case over in Scottsdale. So this actually functions as your backup registrar. So when a client goes to register with the SBA in Mesa, if it's not available, we route across the WAN link and we register with the pool over here in the Scottsdale location. If my branch site over in Mesa is using the pool in Scottsdale as its backup registrar pool, if that pool were to go down and the clients over in Scottsdale start to register with the central site pool in Phoenix, the branch site in Mesa, clients out there will not be able to register over in Phoenix if the SBA goes down. So the backup registrar relationship between central sites do not get passed down to the branch sites in the case of a failure at the central site. So if I'm a client in Mesa, I could either register here in the Mesa branch site SBA, and if that goes down, we can register over here in the central site pool of Scottsdale. If you are a client that's out at the Mesa branch site and the SBA goes down at your branch site, when the client uses the Scottsdale central site pool as your backup registrar and they authenticate and register, you should expect to see full functionality on your client because your application or user mode services will be available to you directly from the central site. Let's take a look at a WAN link failure out on the connection from Mesa over to Scottsdale. When the WAN connection between one of our branch sites and the central site, such as between Scottsdale and Mesa, goes down, your client should expect what's called survivability mode, where they have limited feature sets available to them within inside of their link clients. Because your user mode application services run over in the pool over in Scottsdale, you won't be able to get to certain functionality. The clients out at the Mesa branch site will still be able to register and authenticate up against the SBA. Certain functionalities such as your presence and your conferencing, that runs over in the Scottsdale central site pool. So if I'm a client in Mesa and all of a sudden I can't get across the WAN link, well, I'm going to expect certain functionality to not work for me. So if I have a conference which is currently scheduled, although I can't connect across the WAN link, I would still be able to dial in coming in through my PSTN connection to get to the audio for the conference. The main goal or design of the SBA is voice resiliency for your branch offices. We want to be able to make sure that those users can make and receive phone calls. We want them to have a dial tone even when the WAN link over to the central site goes down. So why does your client only have limited functionality out at the branch site in Mesa when your WAN link goes down? Well, that's because when you deploy an SBA has the mediation server role, it has the registrar role, and it also has an enhanced gateway built in. The role of the SBA is to make sure that your clients can still register and they can still make and receive phone calls in the case of an outage where you cannot connect over to your central site, which does have those application services in them. Here you can see some great examples of SBA appliances produced by Audio Codes. You'll notice that there are multiple models of SBAs, so when you're purchasing a survivable branch appliance, you want to have a good understanding of the number of clients that you're going to be supporting out at a remote office and also the features that you're going to require. Not only do we have multiple manufacturers, but some of the manufacturers have multiple models. For for small, medium, and large-sized branch offices. When purchasing a Survivable branch appliance, it is a third-party device that you're purchasing from a qualified vendor, so you can't go out and just set up an SBA, you have to buy it. The current Survivable branch appliances on the market right now are shipping with Windows Server 2008 R2. After you purchase a Survivable branch appliance, you'll get patches from the vendor. So when Microsoft releases patches to the 2008 R2-based operating system, there's a delay in between the time when Microsoft releases the patches and when the vendor of the SBA gets a hold of the patches and they test it out. Usually there's about a 30-day delay. The Survivable branch appliance is equipped with not only a Windows Server 2008 operating system, but after you set it up, you'll also have the link registrar and the mediation server roles. The link registrar handles the authentication and registration process from your clients. The mediation server handles the interoperability with the gateway or your session border controller. You also want to keep in mind that an SBA also has an integrated PSTN gateway built right in. A Survivable branch appliance is designed to support up to 1,000 users, but you want to do a little research on the appliance that you're purchasing because they're not all created equally. In order for the SBA to provide the ability for your clients to make and receive enterprise voice calls, the SBA has to have some form of connectivity, whether it's a PSTN connection or possibly a SIP trunk connection. You have to remember that the SBA does run the mediation server role, which can intercommunicate with a gateway, a session border controller, or an IP-based PBX. If you want to take a look at some of the qualified gateways that exist out there, you want to take a look at the Unified Communications Open Interoperability Program for Link. You will find that there are multiple vendors competing in this market space, such as Audio Codes, Ferrari, Dialogic, NET, HP, and also Cisco. Another choice for providing enterprise voice resiliency out at our branch offices is using a Survivable branch server. A Survivable branch server is not an appliance that you purchase from a vendor. It's a server that you set up yourself from scratch. To set up a Survivable branch server, you have to meet all of the operating system prerequisites and also the software prerequisites, the same as if you're installing a regular Link server. To install the Survivable branch server, you have to create a branch site inside of your Topology with a Topology builder. And then you have to define the Survivable branch server inside of that branch site. When you go to install the Survivable branch server, you're going to run the setup from the installation media just like you would do with a regular Link box, like a front-end server or a standard edition server. So to proceed with your installation, you're going to use the Link Server 2013 deployment wizard. When you're done the installation of your Survivable branch server, you're going to have two Microsoft Link Server roles installed on that box. You have the Link registrar and you have the mediation server role. So once again, we can handle the authentication and registration process and the intercommunication with the mediation server peers, like your gateway, your session border controllers, or an IP-based PBX. You'll notice that the Survivable branch server does not have an integrated gateway. Because your Survivable branch server does not have an integrated gateway built right in, your connectivity to your services provider could require the purchase of an additional gateway. Your Survivable branch server allows your clients out at that branch office the ability to make and receive phone calls if they lose their connection over to the central site across the WAN link. So very much like your SBA, the Survivable branch server also requires some form of local connectivity for a PSTN connection or a SIP trunk connection. When it comes to the scalability, a Survivable branch server does have an SBA beat because it will support up to 5,000 users. So we're getting ready to set up our branch site for Mesa inside of our Topology. The Mesa branch site is going to be located underneath the central site called Scottsdale. The first thing we would typically do is create a computer account in Active Directory. It doesn't matter if you're setting up an SBA or an SBS. In either case, you're dealing with a server-based operating system that will be participating within your domain or within your forest. We have to have a computer account for this machine. We also have to create the branch site inside of our Topology underneath the central site. So underneath the Scottsdale central site, we're going to create a branch site called Mesa. And inside of that branch site, we're going to define the SBA based off of the FQDN of the SBA. When the SBA arrives at our facilities, we'll typically have one of our universal SBA technicians install it onto the network. There's a universal security group called RTC Universal SBA Technicians. Whenever we create the computer accounts for the SBAs, we typically specify that they have the ability to join that machine into the domain. Here you can see an example of a Dialogic SBA. When the device arrives at the facility, we have to unpackage the device and plug it into the network. Part of the process of setting up your SBA will be connecting to the device, and we typically connect to it through a web-based administrative console. Here you can see an example of a Networking Equipment Technologies, a net appliance connection. So coming in through the web-based console, you can see that I can define the host name, the internet domain name space, I've got the IP address, the subnet mask. Down below the IP addressing, I have my DNS. And finally, over to the right, you can see that I have my default IP route, which is my gateway. So once you have your SBA plugged into the network, and you've configured it with an IP address, with your DNS configuration information, and your domain namespace, you join this machine into your domain, and you now have a Windows Server 2008 R2 machine functioning within your domain-based environment. One of the qualifications for the Unified Communication Open Interoperability Program is that when you purchase a device, it will come with a quick setup guide. Now that we've covered the basic steps for defining a branch site inside of our topology, let's take a look at a demonstration. We're going to create a branch site for Mesa underneath the central site called Scottsdale. In this demonstration, we're going to see how to define a branch site by using the Topology Builder. At Carverock Fitness, we have several branch sites. We're going to start off by creating a branch site for Mesa for a Survivable branch appliance. Now, whether you're setting up a Survivable branch appliance that you purchase from a qualified vendor, or if you're setting up a Survivable branch server from scratch, in either case, you still have to go into Active Directory and create a computer account for those servers. So let's start off our demonstration by going into Active Directory's Users and Computers. And here I'm typing in dsa.msc, and that will open up my Active Directory's Users and Computers Administrative Console. Inside of the console, you can see that I have an organizational unit labeled Link Branch Servers. I'm going to right-click, go down to New, Computer, and then I'm going to define my computer account name for my branch site. So here I have Mesa BR1. And then before I click on OK, you'll also notice down at the bottom where I have User or Group. This is where I can specify the user or group that can join the computer to a domain. And what I'm going to do here is click on Change. Then we'll type in RTC. We'll do a quick search. You see that I have the RTC Universal SBA Technicians Group. This is a universal security group that got created when we prepped the forest for the installation of Link. It's a group specifically defined for people that install SBAs out at our branch sites, our SBA technicians. So here we'll click on OK, and then I'll click on OK again. Now whoever's going to install the SBA, I want to make sure they're a member of this group so they'll be able to complete the task. Now before I close out of the Active Directory's Users and Computers console, we have one more task at hand. We're going to create a service principal name attribute on the computer account inside of Active Directory, and that's used for authentication via Kerberos. So in order to accomplish this, you can either use ADC Edit, but here you'll notice that if I go to my View drop-down menu list, if I have my advanced features enabled, which I do, when I go to the properties for my Mesa BR branch server 1, I have my attribute editor, and I should be able to scroll down. I'm going to click on Service Principal Name. So here you see that I have the Service Principal Name, and then I'm going to specify the value that I want to add in. And you'll use the format of host / followed by the SBA FQDN. And then I'll click on Add, and then we'll click on OK. We'll click on OK one more time. So now we have a computer account in Active Directory. So when the Survivable branch appliance arrives at our facilities, we'll be able to plug it into the network and join it into the domain without any issues. We'll close out of here. Now that we have created a computer account inside of Active Directory for our SBA, the next step is to define our branch site inside of the Topology Builder. So inside of our topology, underneath our Scottsdale site, we're going to create a branch site for Mesa. So let's open up our Topology Builder underneath my Microsoft Link Server 2013 program group. So here we'll click on Link Server Topology Builder, and in order to work on the topology, we're going to download our topology from the existing deployment. we're going to pull in a copy of the topology from CMS directly. And when we get that topology information down to our local PC, we're going to store it inside of a local XML file. And then when we're done making the modifications, we're going to push those changes back up into CMS through a process called publishing. So we're going to wait a moment while the system locates the published topology, and we should be prompted for the name of a file that we're going to use to store this information. And then we'll have to name that file Mesa Branch Install. Let's click on Save. You can see that my topology builder is now loaded up. As I expand the directory tree, you can see that I have my Scottsdale and my Phoenix sites. These are my two central sites, and I want to create a branch site underneath Scottsdale. And this is where I'm going to right-click, create a new branch site, and it is going to be called Mesa. The description is optional. We'll click on Next. Our city is called Mesa, the state is Arizona, and our country code is +1. Now, as we click on Finish, it's going to open up a new Survivable Branch Appliance wizard. The wizard will walk me through the process of defining my SBA or a Survivable Branch server. So the process is one and the same. So let's click on Finish and see what it looks like. On the next property sheet, we have to define the FQDN of the Survivable Branch Appliance. Ours is called Mesa BR1. That's Mesa Branch 1. carverockfitness.com. So all we're defining here is a name that is going to map down to an IP address inside of DNS. So we have to make sure that we're providing our host registrations inside of our internal DNS server for name to IP address resolution. We'll click on Next again. On the next property sheet, we define the front-end pool that our branch site, or more specifically that our SBA, is going to be associated with. You have to remember that a Survivable Branch Appliance has limited link functionality. Whether you set up an SBA or an SBS, they both have the Link 2013 registrar and the mediation server roles. The SBA also has an integrated gateway. Well, what about your user mode services? Well, your services such as your presence and your conferencing, that runs over at the central site. So if a client out at the branch site is hosting a conference, it doesn't run at the branch site. It runs over on the pool that that branch site is associated with. So the front-end pool provides user mode services to your client out at the branch, and it also functions as a backup registrar to the branch. So if a client out at the branch site tries to register up against the SBA or an SBS, and they're not able to because that server is down for whatever reason, the clients can then automatically fail over to registration over at that pool that the branch site is associated with. And the extra added value that you have with this automatic failover is that your user mode application services actually run over on that pool anyhow, so you're not really encountering an outage. And what I mean by that is you're not losing functionality down on your client. Versus if you were out at a branch site and all of a sudden your WAN link went down, well, now you're really out on a little island where you can't connect over across the WAN link to gain access to your user mode applications such as your presence or gaining access to the collaboration portion of your conference. You may still be able to dial in to get to the audio of your conference, but your WAN link's down, so you can't get across the WAN link to the data collaboration piece. So in our case over here, we're going to click on Next. And then we can define if we're going to associate our SBA with an edge pool for our media component traversal across our DMZ. We don't have an edge set up yet, so we're going to click on Next. We'll be able to associate that later when we go back to the server properties. On the next property sheet, we define the PSTN gateway that our SBA is going to be using. So here, I'm going to define the fully qualified domain name, which once again is nothing more than a host name that maps down to an IP address inside of DNS. And we have to create the host records as link administrators. So here we have Mesa GW1 Gateway 1 .fabricam.com. The port that we're going to be using is port 5067 because we are using TLS, which is secure. Now, if the gateway manufacturer or hardware did not support TLS, we can also use TCP, which defaults to port 5066. We're going to stick with port 5067 and TLS. And then we'll click on Finish. Before we publish our topology, let's take a quick look at our Mesa branch server properties. If I open up the properties for Mesa, you can see that I'm currently using IP version 4, but I can also enable IP version 6. It's a new feature with Microsoft Link 2013. We also have the ability to limit service usage to selected IP addresses for intercommunication over with the gateway. So right now you're seeing that I'm using all configured IP addresses, but if I have certain IP addresses that I want to use to communicate with my gateway, I could define that right here. So for example, here my primary IP address is 10.0.0.67, and my PSTN IP address, we have 192.0.0.67. And then we'll scroll down. You'll see that when I go to the properties for the SBA, you can define the associations for your SQL Server for archiving, also for your monitoring services. You can associate that SBA with an edge pool later on. Then here's where we define our resiliency. And you'll notice that it says Associated User Service and Backup Registrar Pool, which, as you remember, the Backup Registrar Pool is the technique that we use for automatic failover when you cannot register with your pool. So this is where you're getting that voice resiliency, in the sense that if I can't register over here with my pool, I'll register over there. Or in this case with an SBA, if your SBA can't register you, you can register over with the primary central site pool that this is associated with. You'll also notice that you cannot change that association like you can with central site pools, because your branch site is associated with one central site exclusively. So you don't have the ability to go in here and say, well, I don't want to associate with that. Because it's a branch site, your branch site SBA has to be associated with a pool. And once again, that's because that's where you're getting your user mode services. At the bottom of the console, you also see here that the mediation server role is co-located on your SBA or your SBS, and you don't have a choice. Down at the bottom of the console, you see that I've got my listening ports. TLS, we're defaulting to port 5067, but we can also enable TCP port 5068. Here we're going to click on OK, and the next step is publishing our topology. So let's right-click, publish the topology. We'll click on Next again, and we're going to wait while the topology verifies my deployment and then takes the changes from my XML file and pushes them back into CMS. And once those changes are pushed back into CMS, every server within my environment, they all have a read-only copy of CMS. So once I've actually published this data to my backend SQL Server, the central management server will handle the replication out to all the other servers within the environment. All your link servers get a read-only copy of CMS or of that topology. So here we're going to click on Finish, and we're done. Now that we have created a computer account in Active Directory, and we've defined our branch site inside of the topology, and created an SBA in the topology also, the next logical step would be getting our SBA, purchasing it, getting it shipped to our company, and having one of our SBA Universal technicians get it configured onto the network. Keep in mind that the clients also have to be enterprise voice enabled to use this, so there's additional configuration with setting up your dial plans, your voice policies, your routes, and your trunks. We're going to see that covered in the enterprise voice portion of the video series. I hope you've enjoyed the lesson, and we'll see you in the next video.